Hello, welcome everyone to Grid Live Wrap Up. We are counting down to week one of the 2025 Grid Ranking next Sunday night and the Grid Endurance Performance Index next Wednesday night on Grid Tonight. But in the meantime, we have two races to recap. The third, if you count the MotoGP Sprint. I'm Joe Samaniego, and with me we have Cody Lambus from Grid Tonight and Tanner Smith from the Pit Box Press. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Con, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Link in the video description. Help us stay on the air, get us to the track. We also encourage everyone, buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. If you do it after we're on the air, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And we want to encourage everyone, gridnetworktv.com for race recaps, clips from our show, and more. We will make a special announcement about our website at the very end of the show. So plenty going on, Tanner, as we're getting ready for the Grid Ranking, the Endurance Performance Index, what both really started the grid. But let's start with NASCAR, a chaotic weekend. I think that's very safe to say. We're going to leave a lot of people talking, especially Ben and Brandon tomorrow on Grid Encore. Encourage everyone. We're going to be getting that stream up shortly. But after that Xfinity race, the Cup Series, once again, ended under regulation. We talked about on Thursday, the respect level. What are we going to see? We saw some tempers, some post-race discussions, but we didn't see fists flying. Mainly, the cameras were focused on Ty Gibbs and Tyler Reddick after contact spun Gibbs around. But we still saw plenty of caution, again, over double digits like we anticipated. Will you consider this the typical Martinsville race that lived up to the hype?
Whether it lived up to the hype might be a little bit up to interpretation, because I think people have different varying levels of their hype for this kind of a race, given the next gen's tattered record at Martinsville and most short tracks. With that said, I was perfectly whelmed by this race, whereas with both of the previous two races in the weekend, I was overwhelmed by all of the chaos. I think that this race played out exactly by the numbers as you would expect a Martinsville race to play out. There is a flurry of cautions at the start of stage 3 as people start to come to grips with the reality of, I'm going to finish 15th and I don't want to finish 15th. So people end up getting rooted out of the way or just outright wrecked in the pursuit of someone trying to get a top 10. Now, I will say that I thought this race was very entertaining for the most part, but up at the front, I felt like once Denny Hamlin got control of this race, the rest of it was pretty much procedural. The guy was just clinical at the front of the field. And anytime that any of the drivers that thought they had a chance to compete with him today got close to him, they eventually lost their tire life and were unable to keep up with his pace. So you've really got to tip your cap to that 11 team. They created a very strong race car for this race, and out of everybody in the field, it seemed that they were the ones that had the strongest mastery of this softer tire. So, like I said, I think that this race was perfectly fine. I don't think it was a great race by any stretch, but it was far from a bad race. So I think it lived up somewhat to the hype of Martinsville, and that it fit this is a typical Martinsville kind of race.
It felt like the Martinsville, especially when it came to the cautions, the being, the banging, the cars, most of them had some sort of paint scrape. Well, nowadays, wrap scraped from contact. I really like with these softer tires and the brake does, how you could see the dirty effect on the car, right? It just gives that nostalgia look that I feel we sort of miss out when the cars just be sandblasted and just roughed up. But up front, like you said, again, it seemed like clean air when Josh Berry had that lead and then pulled out to 2 seconds ahead. I was just thinking, wow. And then Joey Logano gets the lead. Denny Hamlin. It just seems like if you had the lead, boy, you were hard to get around unless you got held up by those caution. I mean, excuse me, not the cautions, but the cars going a lap down. It was just interesting. And again, shifting. I don't anticipate the shifting is making that big of a difference compared to the prior generation where the cars weren't shifting as much. But definitely we got at least less downforce compared to the first few years. I think it's a better product now compared to the first few years with this generation of car. For this race too, I think for Ty Gibbs, like I mentioned, he was having a solid run, top 10, but then Tyler Reddick, contact from him, he finished 13th, still ahead of Tyler Reddick. I almost feel like maybe he could put that behind. It's like I finished ahead of him. I salvaged my first top 15 finish of the year because besides that 16th place finish at Daytona, nothing for Ty Gibbs. So he appears to be moving forward. Do you think, despite the spin, missing out on the top 10, could this build momentum for that 54 team?
I think that with how their year has gone to this point, you have to look at any sign of positive life as momentum. And boy, did they show a lot of mettle and a lot of strength in the latter half of that race. They obviously chose some pitch strategy early in the race to help get themselves closer to the front, and it paid off for them. But I don't know if Gibbs got stuck in the outside on a restart or what, but then he floated back to that like 9th to 15th range. And at Martinsville, that's probably one of the worst places to be, in all honesty. Now, for them to have come back from that spin, you've got to look at it like, would I have finished better where I was at with the tires and the situation I had than what I actually finished after that happened? And frankly, I would say no, they would not have finished as well. So I think if you're Ty Gibbs and Tyler Allen, his crew chief, who is still really just trying to get his feet underneath him in this series on top of the pit box, you've got to look at this as a major win. And it also should give them some confidence that all three of their teammates were also very strong this weekend. I feel like this is the first time we've seen JGR as an entire team put together an entire fleet of cars that were rather formidable. Obviously, you had Hamlin with the dominant win, but Bell was on pole and came home second. Chase Briscoe came home with a very solid top 10 himself for the second straight week, and then Gibbs, with all of his issues, still came home with the top 15. I don't know how you see this as anything other than a victory if you're the 54 team. Obviously, you don't get a trophy out of it like you do when the 11 team wins, but at the end of the day, you've got to take baby steps to get back to victory lane in this series, and this is a very, very solid baby step for that team.
When you say baby steps, I have to say, Ty Gibbs, considering I feel in the past where you will see drivers, they get spun out, and then the race just spirals out of control. They make more mistakes, they fall further behind. That was a big step to just, okay, let's just come back towards the front. And he did. Because, I mean, I believe we had, 22 cars, maybe 23 or 24 on the lead lap at that point of the race, just because the cautions, we kept having one car added on. He could have easily just been stuck in the mid-pack, just beating and banging. Remind me of what happened at the Bowman Gray clash where he was up front, and then he just seems to spiral out of control. So I have to give kudos to Ty Gibbs. Coming up 13th, yeah, you just missed out on the top 10. But what an effort by that team. And like you said, the Toyotas, they were looking good. A typical winner in Denny Hamlin. I mean, give a shout out to the racing expert Jonathan Fields for making that call. He almost had this pick a winner sweep. Of course, quite a few others had Marc Marquez not crash. We'll talk about that later. But Toyota, 1, 2, 3. If there was a podium, all Toyotas. Like you said, Chase Briscoe, top 10 finish again. if it wasn't for that spin, maybe Ty Gibbs would have been in the top 10. But of course, we saw some of the Fords come in, and then of course Chevrolet 4, 5, 6, Elliott Larson and Ross Chastain, the highest finishing Trackhouse car. Overall, were you surprised by the Toyota performance, especially compared to the Chevrolets?
I felt coming into the weekend that Toyota would be stronger than Chevy, but I thought that Ford would be stronger than everybody, and that was so obviously, so clearly wrong. So, as far as Toyota is concerned, I don't think I was too impressed by the speed that they showed, especially JGR. This is a powerhouse team in the NASCAR Cup Series. They should be performing at a high level and should have all four of their cars contending for top 10s and top 5s. So I feel like this is more for JGR, a back to normal type of race for them. As for like 2311 and Legacy, Legacy obviously didn't have the day that they would have hoped for, coming to a track where Richard Petty has had so much immense success, and their last true win before the Southern 500 coming at the Martinsville Spring Race in 1999 with John Andretti. You would have thought that they would have tried to prioritize this track a little bit more, but clearly that did not end up happening. As far as 2311 is concerned, this is not a strong track for Tyler Reddick. I expressed that as much coming into the weekend in our pre-race show, and would you look at that? It seems I was right. Riley Herbst didn't have any expectations for him coming into today other than finish the race, and seems he did that, but he had some issues along the way, we'll say. But Bubba Wallace was consistently in the top 5 the entire race, and I would say this is on par with one of the strongest runs of his entire career, and that win has to be coming soon. So as far as Toyota writ large, JGR I'm not really surprised with. 2311 ran where I thought that they could run with each of their individual drivers. I thought Reddick, if he had a good setup, might have been able to run a little bit better, but that just was not in the cards. And Legacy was kind of just out there, unfortunately, logging laps. So hats off to Toyota and everybody at Toyota Gazoo Racing. They put on a phenomenal performance from mostly the top down, and I'm sure the other teams that didn't perform as well, they'll get everything shaped up before the fall race.
A lot of time till the fall race in Martinsville. Comment in the chat room from Denver. As an Aussie, learning still that all 3 NASCAR series, my belief that NASCAR should have a driver standard advisory for the Xfinity and Truck Series to keep the wayward drivers in check. Now, Tanner, this was something very interesting during the broadcast. They did mention what happened in the Xfinity Series race.
Indeed,
Mike Joy did not hold back. He even said this wasn't a dumpster fire because a dumpster fire is contained. And I just thought, whoa, this is different. I anticipate they're going to smooth over. Oh, it's a wild, crazy finish. But I know we talked about it on the preview show, the respect level. And I feel since COTA, again, even with this race, yeah, we had some of that beating and banging, some of the tempers. Noah Gragson also stands to mind. But I feel that respect level in the Cup Series is going up. We know in the pre-race show, apparently Elton Sawyer in the driver meeting mentioned something about respect level and what happened in the Xfinity Series. Do you feel maybe now, especially everybody being critical on the Xfinity Series, the Truck Series have now gone more races without overtime, and the Cup Series as clean as they are? Do you think we're starting to maybe see where that is overall improving?
Well, obviously you want your top series to be the most buttoned up and to be the most respectful. And I would say at this point, and I'm saying it begrudgingly because it can always change at the drop of a hat, I think the Cup Series is the most respectful series, followed very closely by the trucks. But even they had a pretty bumpy Friday night, all things considered. As far as just talking about the driving standards of the Xfinity series, this is kind of a thing that I've noticed for probably the last decade or so, and it's that when a cup competitor does something egregious, it trickles down to the other series. And essentially, what I mean by that is we can find the root of the 2025 spring race finish all the way back in the 2017 fall race for the Cup Series. And obviously, what I'm referencing is Denny Hamlin driving through Chase Elliott into turn 3 on a late restart and completely cleaning him out. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of rich that Denny Hamlin had so much to say following that race on Saturday night when, like I said, this all really kind of stems back to him and him not getting punished for those actions that night. And we kind of went a few years where Martinsville played out about as you would expect without much pomp and circumstance. But then we get to the end of the 2022 Xfinity fall race. We have that whole incident with Ty Gibbs and Brandon Jones, which was a practical mirror of the Hamlin-Elliott incident where the guy behind does not intend to make the corner and completely cleans out the guy in front of him. And then we had the same thing happen the following year in that same race where Austin Hill dove into turn 3, not trying to make the corner, and pounded his teammate Sheldon Creed and caused a massive calamity behind them. This isn't unheard of. And I'm tired of people clutching their pearls about it and acting like this is something new every time that it happens. I would like to see, to our commenter's point, that I would like to see some form of driving standards coalition come together, but I'm going to be honest, if it was to come together, it would have come together already. We're, 77 years into this sport, and we are still kind of kind of playing with our hands and trying to figure out, what actually is deserving of a suspension and what isn't. And, he was only going X amount of speed, so maybe that's not enough for a suspension. Like, the gray in the NASCAR rulebook is in all the wrong places, and I'm frankly getting a little fed up with it myself, and it seems that multiple people in social media are as well. So, yeah, to say that the driving standards this weekend were not only subpar, but just downright deplorable would be an understatement. And it would be extremely prudent for the Cup Series and just everybody at NASCAR to rein in the field, because Martinsville is supposed to be one of the best races on the calendar that we all look forward to in both of the dates that we visit them. And frankly, in the lower series, I don't really look forward to those races because, as great as they are, too often they end in just a bunch of mess, and nobody wants to see that. So yeah, I would like to see a little bit more respect shown out on the track amongst all three series, but especially the lower two, because when you get up to Cup, those guys are not going to just lean over and let you by. They're going to fight really hard for their position, because for, I would say, about a third of the field, a lot of them feel like their jobs are at stake going into the following season. So yeah, I would love to see a little bit more respect amongst the drivers, but I feel like the best time to do that is probably the off season, and the off season's unfortunately past us and nothing happened. So for anybody that's looking for a change in the middle of the season, you might just want to keep waiting and hold your breath.
Something else with when it comes to driving standards, and I feel like definitely in the Cup Series, where we were in 2017, especially that race, you had the Chase Elliott incident, and then, of course, the big mess coming to the checker flag, and everyone was just on the gas, crashing, trying to get across the finish line. I just thought then that was a really low point. And here we are today, and I feel okay, the racing, we just about had some green flag pit stops even in Martinsville. Yeah, loose wheel from Shane Van Gisbergen ruined that, but we had some good racing and the being and banging, and I think it was at the point when the commentators were all just essentially critical of the Xfinity Series race. I think it really shows that maybe people are getting to that point where we expect better, but a lot of valid points, especially the Xfinity Series drivers. You're all trying to move up. And we know Ben and Brandon tomorrow are going to have plenty to see on the Encore show. So be sure to subscribe.
I might be on there as well.
Oh, I think that'll be a fun idea, of course. So, and Encore tomorrow, that's going to be a lot of fun. We said on Thursday, if Penske did not have cars in the top 10, it would not be fun. And the headquarters Monday, I don't know what the mood is going to be there Monday, because Team Penske just a bit behind everybody, I felt. Logano, yeah, he got that stage one, but that caution really helped him. And of course, we'll get to Barry. But then that final stage, Chase Briscoe spins him around. He still managed to come back to get his first top 10 finish of the year, which is very surprising. Ryan Blaney in the top 10 as well. But for a while, he was in 10th behind Todd Gillian in 9th, who still finished ahead of him. And then, of course, Ryan Preece, the highest finishing Ford, 7th. Then Austin Cindric, battery issues, ran out of batteries, was done for the day, the only car out of the race. And the crazy stat that just blew me away, I know we've talked about how it seems like Ford has had some bad luck, doesn't have the finishes there. Mike Joy said Ford coming into today's race, and it's still the same because no Fords were in the top 5, only 5 top 5 finishes this year, 2 of them from Josh Berry alone. And then I could think of in Las Vegas, you had Ryan Preece 3rd place. So that just means 2 others. And it was just
Blaney,
like, wow.
Atlanta, and
Yep.
I'm trying to probably would have been Daytona, right? Maybe.
I'm thinking Daytona. But yeah, Blaney in Atlanta, I was just like, oh my goodness, that's insane that Fords have had so few top 5 finishes. Do you think this is something more than just luck, though? Because I know the season starts off with the 2 unpredictable races, a road course. We had Vegas, we had Phoenix, Martinsville. Do you think there's a little bit more than luck that might have the Fords a little bit disadvantage?
So I lean towards saying that Ford is actually stronger than the results have been able to show to this point. I feel like Ryan Blaney in particular, him and Logano both have an extremely high stage point total. So they're clearly showing speed at other points in the race, and it took until week 7 for Joey Logano to finally log a top 10 this year. Now, granted, it was a 10th place finish, so it wasn't anything glamorous like a 6th or a 7th. So he really had to, truly crawl and grab for everything that he had today, which was, a pretty impressive final run for him. I think that he probably passed more cars than really anybody. Now, as for Ryan Blaney, it seemed like, and this is complete conjecture on my part, but it seemed like right before that final round of pit stops, it seemed that the sun was going to come out. And within about 15 minutes of that sun starting to peek out, it went right back behind the cloud cover. And if I had to take a guess, that 12 team on that last stop took a swing towards the sun being more out and missed entirely, which, while unfortunate, that'll happen from time to time. I still think it was rather impressive that they were able to come back from 32nd to even be competing for a top 10. And you also saw someone like Ryan Preece through that last run really start to advance his position. I think that he had a bit of a tire advantage on some of the drivers ahead of him, and that was probably why he was able to make some passes, but that's still a strategy choice, and it was at a track that Preece is notoriously strong at, so it made sense for them to do that. I will say it was a little concerning that both Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski never really contended. Todd Gilliland obviously had a strong performance. Zane Smith had a pretty solid run as well, despite running into Ty Gibbs under that caution when he spun out. But yeah, overall, I lean towards Ford's lack of results being a result of their poor luck, especially with the 12 team, who clearly has been the banner driver for that manufacturer to this point. But those two blown engines and that wreck at Vegas kind of skew things to where it doesn't look as strong. But when I look at the Cup Series standings right now, Ryan Blaney has 74 stage points versus William Byron, our point leader, at 70. Bubba Wallace has 69. I'm trying to find Logano. He's at 61. He got another playoff point today. And Josh Berry was obviously in the running to get a playoff point there as well. But that late caution forced pretty much everybody down pit road. And then the whole battery thing kind of happened. And that's about as bad luck as it gets. Because last week, Josh Berry drives into the side of Kyle Larson's car at a similar angle and only puts a hole there, doesn't do any internal damage to the car, and they come around and win. And this week, the same thing happens to Josh Berry. There's less cosmetic damage, but it damages something on the inside of the car. That, to me, is just picture-perfect bad luck. So I would definitely say that Ford, they missed the mark a little bit today, but they've won the last two fall races there. And I have to imagine that, given what Mike Joyce said on the broadcast about Jonathan Hassler wanting to come into this weekend with a bit more of an open playbook rather than continuing to run the same setup that they've been running, they went out there and tested, more or less. And they'll come back in the fall and probably be right back where they were the last two fall races. So though Ford doesn't really have the results just yet, I'm not counting them out by any stretch. They've shown a lot of speed at pretty much every track, even today. They just haven't really had the circumstances to really back up the performance that they've shown.
The performances have been there. That fifth, top five, that was Chris Buescher in Phoenix, fifth place, that we were missing. But that's interesting because that means you have essentially those RFKs have two top fives, Barry, two with the Wood brothers, and then one from Penske. Penske is by far the lead Ford team. I mean, they have the resources. They provide that fourth car for the Wood brothers. They've had strong cars, just the luck is not there. When it comes to RFK, they were just missing today. I mean, Chris Buescher making contact with front row, another fellow Ford, who's also in the Penske alliance. That didn't go too great. We saw for a while Cole Custer up in the top 10, but he fell back. Tires, management just not working out in his favor. I think overall, this is something where with Ford, you're so reliant on the Penske 3. If Josh Berry has good luck and a good fast car, he could be up there like Vegas. Everybody else, I feel, is just a little bit behind. RFK is not off to a good start compared to last year. They could change that at Darlington, I feel, especially Buescher. Brad Keselowski is just not having that great start of a season at all.
Can I interject a little bit there? I did see an interesting thought experiment, which was that the 60 car is actually the second RFK car, and Brad is actually running all of the experimental setups on the 6 car with Jeremy Bullins. And I don't know how much I believe it necessarily just based off of concept alone, but I will say it it's certainly a disturbing lack of pace from the 6 team throughout the first 7 weeks of the season compared to even where they were at this point last season. So, yeah. And especially given where Priest has finished, I feel like he's been, at times, the best RFK car. So there might be some credence to that conspiracy, but I don't know how much I buy into it. Breaking news.
Yeah, we're just seeing on according to Bob Pockris on Twitter, Eric Jones disqualified for failing to meet minimum weight. So Eric
Too
Jones.
skinny. Okay. Not that matters at all. But where did he even finish today?
He was just not having that great of a day at all in Martinsville.
No.
Taking a look at the provisional results, Eric Jones was 24th in the Dollar Tree Toyota. He earned 5 stage points, so he forfeits those.
That sucks for
So
them.
that's a bummer for him. But yeah, this essentially moves up folks like Busher, who we just talked about. A couple of
he had an adventurous day.
Adventurous. Keselowski goes from 27th to 26th. So that's another point. But yeah, that's just coming in from Bob Pockris right now on X Twitter. Crazy to see that coming. And like you said, that's an interesting theory. If Keselowski's doing more of the experimental stuff and trying to figure out something else, because really, he's the driver with the most experience for the championship. If he just gets one win, that's all he needs to do is just show up, get the win at Talladega or somewhere, and he's in the playoffs. Could be a contender again. It'll be really interesting to see how the Fords could continue putting together this season. Pit road, that was the weakness for Josh Berry last week. That was the weakness for Josh Berry this week, and we talked about how it could be havoc. I felt it was definitely havoc for multiple drivers. And for me, the surprise was the tire wear level we saw. Because in that second caution, towards the end of stage 1, Josh Berry, he had stayed out that first caution to get the track position. He kept the lead, a 2-second lead even. Logano's behind him. We get a caution. Berry pits. Logano stays out. I think a couple of others stayed out as well, too. The contact, Josh Berry, he's done for the day, essentially, after contact with Bubba Wallace. Logano is just 2 laps, wins the stage. Stage 3, some teams, they divide that stage into thirds. 2 pit stops, some half cautions the way they played out. Of course, fiddle with everything. But were you surprised by the pit road strategy sort of adding a new element that caught some teams by surprise? Because I keep thinking if Berry had stayed out and Logano stayed out, he maybe could have won and held off those last 2 laps.
I wouldn't say that the pit strategy of it all threw people off, but I will say that I think others were more prepared for not running as well and adjusting on the fly as others. Someone like Ryan Blaney, who as soon as he got up to about 7th, that's about where he plateaued. I think that with 22 cars on the lead lap into one of those later cautions, I feel like that's kind of the breaking point of I should probably come get tires because they're 40 laps old. And instead he stayed out, finished behind his teammate who did put on tires because he got spun out. So I think as far as that is concerned, some teams were a bit more equipped than others for a bit more of a strategy race. But it's really unfortunate that we didn't get to see those green flag stops pan out because SVG's tire decided to press escape and leave his car. And it's the same thing that ruined the first round of green flag pit stops at Vegas. So it's really becoming a bit more of a concerted issue that we haven't really seen since about 2022 when we first went to this one lug system with the tires. As far as the rest of the race, I would have been interested if that third stage had lasted the whole duration without a caution. I think that seeing different teams split it between stopping stopping twice and stopping once, I think that would have been really interesting. Just seeing like cars going at different speeds, that can present a whole bunch of issues that would be unforeseen otherwise. But overall, I felt like strategy really wasn't able to take a true foothold in this race. I don't think that anybody that stayed out under any of those early yellows really had any staying power. I know that Logano, it seemed, got an advantage by staying out longer, but he even qualified in the top 10. So it wasn't something where he was running like 15th and got pushed to the front because of these, strategy differences. He had to scrape and claw his way back up to the top 10 because he made that gamble. He was able to claw back, then he got wrecked, then he got on fresher tires, and then clawed right back up to the top 10. So I think that if a lot of these teams that finished less than fifth, I think if they go back and look at everything on Monday and see kind of how the race played out, if they would have gone about it differently. But outside of that, I didn't really feel strategy played too big of a factor in the outcome of the race. It played more of a factor into who earned stage points and who didn't. And I'm going to be honest, that's not why I come to watch the races. I come to watch how the race develops and ends, not who gets stage points. So yeah, I felt the strategy could have played a bigger part today, but because of circumstances, it really wasn't allowed to. And that's a bit of a shame. But at the end of the day, I feel like we got a pretty solid 6.5, 7 out of 10 race. So I can't really complain too much.
Overall, the race, I felt it was pretty good when it comes to what we would see in Martinsville. The dirty air, I would have loved to see more racing for the lead. The restarts were like the best opportunities for that, but it was just one of those deals where that's just a challenge I think NASCAR is going to have in every track. It does give me hope for Richmond. I think Richmond is going to be a good race again. I'm curious to see with the softer tire over at North Wilkesboro's too. Third year, hopefully we get a much better product. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything goes. Just one of those deals, fingers crossed, is just how so many conditions play into that. And of course, Bristol, that's going to be one too. Who knows where we're going to be anticipating with that race. Next race for them, that'll be Darlington, the Lady in Black. We know it's always going to be too tough to tame the Goodyear 400. Throwback weekend, we're going to be very excited. Be sure to subscribe, bell icon. Don't miss our Thursday preview for the NASCAR race weekend at Darlington. Meantime, let's go ahead and bring in Kobe for the other event, MotoGP, the Americas Grand Prix, and a big moment that people left stunned.
Yes, it's definitely a stunning moment, John. Speaking of too tough to tame, it seemed like COTA was a little too tough to tame for Marc Marquez, and it was a drama-filled weekend at the Circuit of the Americas for MotoGP. The big story was Marc Marquez having a big crash in practice, but he ended up recovering from that pretty quickly, took the pole, won the sprint race, but he crashed out while leading the Grand Prix of the Americas. It was his first DNF of the season, and he lost the points lead to his brother, Alex Marquez. Joe, are you surprised by Marc Marquez's big mistake today, despite being perfect on track entering COTA?
I was surprised just because he felt like he was doing everything he needed to do. He had the big lead. Just getting on that white paint, the curb, just a little too much, losing the bike. And it's just one of those deals where I almost feel like, in a way, might be a bit of a reality check for Marc Marquez, because they talked about how time and time again he has won here, but he also has crashed out while leading. He had a comfortable lead over his teammate Pecco Bagnaia. Alex Marquez for a while was in second place. The conditions were drying off. There's that question of how hard do you push, and he had been looking flawless the first 5 races, the 2 Grand Prix, the 3 sprints. I mean, everyone had picked him for pick a winner. He makes this mistake. This is just a reminder with MotoGP. Every lap counts. Every corner matters. You have to be perfect, because if you make one mistake, you can't just spin around and keep going, because in the case of Marc Marquez, yes, he was able to get his bike going again, but he was missing the leg peg. He was clearly not having the handling with that windscreen gone. He had to come into the pits. First DNF, no points, loses the points lead by 1 point to his brother. I don't think it's going to rattle him, but I think it's going to just sort of remind everybody, this is a long season, 24 race weekends. Each of them has a sprint race. It's far from game over, but you got to really step it up, because you can't count on a Marc Marquez mistake every time to be your chance to get a win.
Yeah, definitely a frustrating situation for Marc Marquez, because besides that practice crash, he looked totally unbeatable this weekend, taking the pole, dominating the sprint race. And then in the Grand Prix, it looked like he was on cruise control, right? Out front, and then had that terrible mistake. And then, it was a game over at that point from today. Yeah, Marc Marquez wants to run away with his championship. He can't have those mistakes like that, because that was a huge missed opportunity. I'm sure the only person who's really happy after today is Pecco Bagnaia, because he was basically gifted there a race win, because if Marc Marquez hadn't made a mistake, Marc was going to run away with that one, just like he's done the other Grand Prix and sprint races that we've seen so far this year. But we'll have to wait to see how Marc bounces back from this. Like you said, Joe, I don't think that this is going to be something that'll hurt Marc's confidence or anything like that. I think he'll bounce back quickly, and we'll probably see him winning the next race. But we know one thing, given how fast he is on that Ducati bike, he's probably going to be winning a lot more races later on this season. Just a disappointing end to the weekend for the rider that they like to call the King of COTA. And today he definitely wasn't king at all, because the track won. And before the race started, there was a dramatic moment that occurred. I went back and watched this, Joe, after you told me about it. I had no idea this was happening. And then I saw the scenes myself. I'm like, this is very strange right before the race, because Marc Marquez left the grid, like right before they're about to do the formation lap. To switch to the slick tire bike. So did other riders as well. And somehow Maverick Vinales ended up without a bike for a second, and that's, leads to an awkward situation. And the start was abandoned, and the Ducati factory team management were absolutely furious. And due to all of this chaos happening at the start of the race, the race start was actually delayed by 15 minutes, and it was a super confusing situation. Joe, do you believe the initial start needed to be aborted, and should MotoGP change their procedure moving forward?
When Maverick Vinales was somehow on the grid without a bike, that's when I was thinking, this has to be aborted. But how did this happen? I just never seen anything like this. And if anything, Marc Marquez, give him the credit. He saw the track conditions are drying. There was a couple riders on slick tires already. He was willing to make that gamble, the Ducati team, to say, we're going to give up our front row starting position. He's going to run to the pits, get on the slick tire bike, start from pit lane, be towards the back. But once his brother, Alex Marquez, then Pecco, and then multiple drivers, and then you had Luca Marini, all of a sudden, the first starting rider, the chaos of then Maverick Vinales, I'm assuming he tried to go get on the slicks, decided not to, came back, his bike was gone. That's why I think MotoGP was like, timeout, we can't just have you all start. And that had to be left Ducati really upset, because they were hoping to take advantage of this opportunity. Marc Marquez, the others, go towards the front of the slicks, get around some of those riders on the wets. That all went down the window. Essentially, everybody then started on the slick tires because of that situation. If I was MotoGP, I feel like this is just one of those rare deals where we had heavy rain before. We even had a safety car had an issue on the track before the race. So weather played a role in this. So if I was MotoGP, review, the procedure, see how everything goes. The chance of this happening again, very slim unless you have the exact same conditions. But I think if anything, MotoGP should say, look, if we have a weather situation, you have to at least complete the warm-up lap on the bike. If you come out to the end of the warm-up lap and you want to switch to the slick tire, just pull into the pit road. That would have been a lot simpler, because this really caught MotoGP totally off guard. They were just starting up the intro with the music, showing all the riders. Then they cut out, and there's Marc Marquez sprinting down the pit road. I don't think they ever did show the intro again, and it just made for a confusing situation. Then we delayed the start time, and we're in the United States of America. Big churn out there at COTA. Not as big as Formula One when they show up there, and not sure how to compare with NASCAR's there either, but I feel this is a big market you only visit once. This is not exactly the kind of delayed start that looks that great for your sport. Granted, MotoGP fans in the United States will be loyal. This is their one race. They'll go to it. I don't think it's going to be a long-term issue, but I think MotoGP should at least consider just a small tweak that, hey, if the weather's changing and you want to switch bikes, you do that after the warm-up lap, get in pit road, switch bikes, start in the back. That would have made it a lot more simpler and a lot less messy situation.
Yeah, and in that moment, it seemed like Marc Marquez was playing chess while everybody else was playing checkers. It was such a dramatic scene, and honestly, when I saw him start running, I'm like, so like, what does this mean for the start? So Joe, you said like if Mark, tell this to a MotoGP newbie like I am. So if Marc Marquez had switched to the slick tire bike, he would have had to start in the rear, correct?
Starting the rear is.
And then that got you, and that would have given him a massive advantage if basically if he was like the only one, and then the others, started off on the wet tire bike. So that would have given him a massive advantage over the fields, and that's exactly why the Ducati factory team were very upset. And I actually watched Marc Marquez's interview after the race and listened to what he had to say to TNT Sports, and he basically said he knew what he was saying, that this was basically a plan of his. As soon as like right before the race started, he was going to sprint to the pit lane. As soon as his chief engineer told him that that the slick tire bike was ready to go, that's when he said, "I want that one." And then he said he knew people behind would follow. Yeah, so very interesting there. Marquez knows that he has some type of leverage, and power within the MotoGP paddock for him to be able to pull off something like that. I know it didn't go as planned as what Ducati thought would happen, but hey, you got to give him credit, for knowing ins and out of the rules. But yeah, definitely, he was playing high level chess there, so that was definitely quite a moment.
Yeah, it was quite a moment. And Marc Marquez, I mean, if you look in the video, he never sat down on the bike. He would just stand it, waiting, and then he just bolted for the pit. It caught everybody, and I think that's when Alex is sitting and then sees, and it's like, you know what? And he goes, and what a moment. It's something MotoGP, they'll be talking about, like, wow, that was something extraordinary, but we shouldn't be seeing something like that again, especially when it interrupts your big MotoGP intro.
That'll probably be something we won't see happen again. So I guess next time we see the MotoGP rulebook come out, there will probably be an update to whatever rule this is in the rule book, and try to make sure they don't have something like this happen again. Like I said, Joe, the American MotoGP fans are loyal. They're really excited to come out to the only American round that MotoGP has, and also for the viewers at home. I don't think it's gonna hurt MotoGP at all in any major way. Given that they just signed this big broadcasting deal in the United States with Fox Sports. I believe the race was on Fox Sports Business Network today. I streamed it on the Fox Sports Live app. Yeah, but really happy about that TV deal. See where things are headed. I think the broadcasts are getting better and better each time, especially with the timing of the commercials. Remember the season opener I was watching? It was late at night. They were just kept cutting out at awkward times, and I haven't seen any of that the last two Grand Prix. So really happy that they're doing much better than that. And as I said, Alex Marquez leads his brother by a single point in the rider standings. Pecca Bagnaia, today's race winner, is 12 points behind in third place. And the next race weekend is April 11th through 13th in Qatar for the Qatar Grand Prix race weekend. We'll see if Marc Marquez will be able to bounce back then. And with that said, it's time for our Grid 1 shining moment from this race. And we'll bring Tanner back on for this. So let us know down in the comments below, what's the one thing that stood out to you from this race weekend, whether it was from MotoGP at COTA or NASCAR at Martinsville? And Tanner, take it away. What's your Grid 1 shining moment?
I'm going with Truck Series winner Daniel Hemric. This man has been through the ringer. First, he goes his entire lower series career without winning and lands at RCR with a major opportunity in 2019 to go win cup races. And unfortunately, that season was the implementation of the NA18D package, the low horsepower, high downforce package that everyone widely disliked. And within that year, Tyler Reddick was acquired by RCR in the lower series, so they moved him up and completely left Hemric on the doorstep for 2020. A couple years go by, he ends up in the Xfinity Series full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing with a contract that only pays him when he gets top fives. And while Hemric did do that a lot, he still didn't win until the final race of the season, where he made a late move on Austin Cindric and barely eked him out at the finish line to claim not only his very first NASCAR National Series win, but a championship in the Xfinity Series. He moved up to Cup not long after that. Obviously, he had a couple of seasons with Colleague in Xfinity that didn't exactly go as well as you'd hoped. His second stint in Cup did not exactly yield the results they would have hoped at Colleague Racing, so Hemric decided to take the John Hunter Nemechek route and go down to a contending truck in the Truck Series. And after the leaders basically all wiped themselves out in front of him, it was a duel between himself and Tyler Ankrum, his new teammate. And after a weekend of complete disrespect and utter disregard for your competitors' vehicles, we saw a relatively clean finish to the truck race that yielded at least in that series, first-time winner. And as someone that banged the table in our preseason predictions that Daniel Hemric was going to have a multi-win season this year, it felt good to see him get off on a good start in the season's fourth or fifth race and get that first victory out of the way. It'll probably be the first of many for the MHR bunch, but you got to tip your cap to the 19 team and Daniel Hemric. They put together a fast truck, stayed in the mix, and when the seas parted in front of them, they charged through and took the victory.
My shining moment is going to come from MotoGP. Pecco Bagnaia. This is a rider where he is the defending champion, defending grid ranking world champion. Excuse me, not defending champion. Jorge Martin. Apologize about that. First rider to win 11 races, more than 10 races, and not claim a championship. I think he's been under a tremendous amount of pressure. The fact that he has Marc Marquez as his teammate. Marc Marquez has gotten the pole every weekend so far in 2025, has swept the 3 sprint races. Looked like he was on the way to sweep another race weekend to get his 3rd Grand Prix. Makes a mistake, but he had the whereabouts to put himself in that position to win the race today. He got around Alex Marquez. He raced a great race. When Pecco Bagnaia is on the top of his bike in good form, he is hard to beat. We've seen that. I think he's been a little bit of a confidence issue, especially coming up short on the championship, despite all the Grand Prix race wins he had last year. This has to be a big boost to show that, hey, there is no number 1 rider. Everyone's going to say that's Marc Marquez. But remember, Pecco Bagnaia, 2 championships already. He could claim his 3rd. He just has to focus on what he needs to do. Pecco Bagnaia, get in the win. That is my shining moment.
And I'm going to give my shining moment to Ryan Preece from RFK Racing. Given what this guy's had to go throughout his NASCAR career, it's really nice to see him be able to, put it all together for the last few race weekends to get good, solid top 10 finishes for RFK Racing. And he's had a lot to prove heading into this season, because I know people have been critical of him. Like people have always been high on his talent, but in the Cup Series, it hasn't always fallen into place for him. But it really seems like the the number 60 team is starting to build something really special right now, and we'll see if it continues. But Ryan Preece seems to be in a really good position right now in his NASCAR career. At one of the better teams in the Cup Series of RFK with teammates Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher. And if Ryan Preece can keep this up, later on into the season, who knows what he could do? He could potentially clinch himself a playoff spot and maybe advance out of the first round if he's able to get in. But there's definitely a lot to be happy about if you're on that number 60 team at RFK Racing. So another solid showing from Ryan Preece. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time for tonight. But Joe, I believe it's time for a special announcement that you alluded to at the very start of the show. Starting tomorrow at 10 a.m., we're going to officially launch the new Grid Network website. Really happy to see this come together. I know we decided to do this during the NASCAR Olympic break last year because we felt like that switching it over to the WordPress brand was the best thing for Grid Network moving forward as we try to expand our portfolio, not just being here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or other streaming platforms. That we also want to have a website where we can provide our people here at Grid Network to write as well. As you can see right here on the homepage of our Grid Network logo, you can see the latest 6 articles right here. And then at the end of every show, we try to post the episode so you make sure you don't miss those. And some of our featured segments are right there as well. And here's our programs, and then some of shots from our on-site coverage. And we also have to give a big thank you to the Cornerstone Web Studio for the great work that they've done with our website. It's been fantastic. And you click right here on news. You can see all the categories here, and you can read about your favorite racing series that we've covered here at Grid Network. And to meet the team, you can see each and every member here on the Grid Network team, read a little bit about them, see their social media pages. And if you're interested in joining the Grid Network team, please click contact us right here and reach out to us on LinkedIn. And these next 2 tabs right here, you can look at the full history of the Grid Ranking as we come up on week 1 of the Grid Ranking 1 week from tonight, Sunday, April 6th. You're really excited to get this year's Grid Ranking week 1 underway. And you can click right here to button, see any year from last year's Grid Rank all the way to the inaugural one in 2017. And also, if you go over to endurance as well, you can check out the Grid Endurance Performance Index as well and its short history. And then final page, you can look at our mission statement, what we want to accomplish here at Grid Network, and the mission that we all have here for each and every person involved here. And there's a great message there from Joe. And also we have our privacy policy right down here on the page. But yeah, all in all, really excited to see where this is all going with our Grid Network website.
Very exciting website launch. And of course, we want to thank everyone that has made it possible, especially our investors on Patreon, Con the Show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for helping us get this new website, get it updated, and of course, the team as well. Encourage everyone, you could do one time through Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. And once again, that is gridnetworktv.com, and of course on social media at Grid Network TV. And don't forget the Grid Ranking and Grid Endurance coming up. And pick a winner. As I mentioned, Jonathan came close to a sweep, 2 out of 3. If had Marc Marquez not crashed out, that would have been a sweep. But I think it's safe to say, I know last year we had Kiska, the Grid Network dog, do Max Verstappen. I think it's about time she comes back for Marc Marquez picks throughout Pick a Winner starting the next race weekend. So encourage everyone, be sure to follow us, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Don't miss any of our programs, especially Monday, Grid Encore. Ben, Brandon, Tanner, I'm hoping you'll be there too, because a lot to talk about with Sammy Smith controversy. Then Wednesday Grid tonight, Kobe's going to be there, Josh Burch, Matt White to analyze the Yuki Tsunoda promotion at Red Bull. Thursday, Grid Live pre-race, NASCAR preview for Darlington, Goodyear 400. That's going to be a fun show. And then another fun show coming up on Saturday, the annual Grid Live After Dark, a couple of hours before the Japanese Grand Prix, the big show again. We'll be sharing links to our past Grid Live After Dark episodes on social media, so be sure to tune into those because those were pretty fun shows. Then next Sunday we do it all over again. Grid Life wrap up big show weekend because of week 1 of the 2025 grid ranking will be unveiled first Sunday of April, and then of course that following Wednesday, the Grid Endurance Performance Index on Grid Tonight. Thank you for tuning in. For Kobe and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thanks for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.